like the big idea behind this, at least for me, is, and as I've gotten more, as I've become more read in the scriptures, I really see that seclusion and aloneness is oftentimes what evil drives us to be able to control us. So I think many times holiness, even though it can be very difficult, because then we have to deal with the sins of others. And so because, all right, I'm about to tell you guys of a big sin that a lot of us pastors say, all right? We say this a lot. I could get so much more done if it wasn't for all those people. Right? Like that, like that, which is hilarious because our job is people, right? Like that is our job. So we joke around and we say that when we get all together and all that. But that's something. But sometimes we say that and think that to ourselves that, man, this would be so much easier if I didn't have to deal with Dale, or I didn't have to deal with Sheila or something like that. Hopefully there aren't any Sheilas here today. But if we have to deal with those people, then you're like, oh, I don't know if I can go forward here. And that's kind of what this sermon series is about. It's about saying that life together is good. Life together is kind of how it was intended from the very beginning. And there are many things, many of which can be hurts that we've had in the past, many of which could be someone said something to us that was really unfortunate that they said something like that, and it can drive us to be alone. And many times we could find healing and closeness to God Himself in the body of Christ together. And that's kind of what we're talking about. Because the whole idea behind this is 1 Peter is writing to a group of people who have been displaced. There's something in the church that we call the diaspora. It's the great sending, right? But it's not sending because everyone's like, yay, the Holy Spirit is in my life. I'm now going to go out to all the world. It's not really how it worked. Great persecution had fallen upon people, and now they were going out over the world. They were being sent out. And these Christians, these people of God, they were going out in these other areas, and they were kind of losing their identity. Kind of losing who they are. And many of them are beaten down and broken. Many of them are slaves now, and they don't know how to move forward. They don't know how to function going forward. Like, who am I? And Peter is writing to encourage them in all of this. So we have one big question this morning, and that is, who are you? Who are you? Now, I don't want to create an existential crisis to anyone in the room where you sit and back, well, I don't know who I am, but that's a question that often gets asked is, who are you? Many people, I think for the first year I was here, I did a lot of explaining about my last name. So my last name's Escher. Good German last name, right? Good German last name. And I have a certain identity of Escher, but a lot of people think that because my last name is Escher, they think that I know everything that there is to ever know about being German. I don't. I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. I grew up in the heart of the South. The closest my family ever got to sausage was hot dogs. That's just the way it went in our family. Like my German identity just isn't there. And I haven't done like the 23andMe thing, but if I follow my family tree around, I'm like an eighth German. Yeah, the name line has gone there, but I'm just not that. And I remember when I went to seminary, and seminary in St. Louis was kind of a new experience for me because it was kind of the first time I'd been out of the South. And you really got a lesson in a bunch of stuff the first time you come out of the South. And so first time out of the South in St. Louis, and there's all these guys from all over the Midwest. And first off, this is just my first beef, I'm from Atlanta, Georgia, one of the most powerful most powerful cities in the country, right? And these people from Podunk, Wisconsin, are making fun of me because I'm from the South. And I was like, come on, guys. All right, let's look. I know you like your possum in that soup, but let's talk about it, right? And so, but I would get up there, and a lot of people had an understanding of what church in a community looked like back then. And I would be like, that's not how church looked like in my community. Because they had this lived experience that I did not live. They're like, oh, Lutheran churches on every corner, like all these things. Maybe some of you grew up in that understanding. It was me, Atlanta has 5 million people inside of it. Has 5 million people, at least it did when I was growing up in the metro area. And we break up everything in that city by the freeways. And between each chunk, there was usually a Lutheran church. So there's usually one LCMS church for 1 million people in that city, right? And these people are coming from a town of 5,000, and there's 5 of them in that town. I was like, I didn't grow up that. I grew up in Atlanta. I'm half Baptist, guys. It's just what we are. It's just what we are. We all are going to the river to pray, and all those things. That's just the truth of the matter. And when I look at my identity and my who I am, it's kind of hard to put a finger on it. And when people try to look at me, it's like, oh, you're a Lutheran pastor, you have Escher's last name, you have all this German heritage. And I'm like, no, not really. I'm kind of Heinz 57 American, right? Like some people like me around, but you don't really put it on anything. That's kind of just what I am. And what's interesting is when I look back at my own life and look at all the different experiences I have, it can almost look kind of like a patchwork quilt. It can kind of look like a patchwork quilt of all these different experiences. And in fact, I have a good object lesson. Ooh, here, let me go back and get it. We commissioned an artist by the name of my grandmother. And she made us a quilt this year, actually. She made us a quilt. And so she actually made us 2 of these. I won't tell you why. We kind of thought we were getting one. But we gave her a bunch of old T-shirts. I don't know what way is up on this thing. Here we go. I should maybe plan better about all of that. Here, I'll put it right there. You can see it. But we got a bunch of old T-shirts that were here, many of which I designed. And like that was the Florida Georgia District T-shirt for 2010's youth gathering. I did that. And so that's but many of which, this is the church T-shirt from before, and a bunch of just little T-shirt designs and all that stuff of lives kind of lived. And what was interesting about all these T-shirts is they kind of all represent a fun time in my past. Right? They all represent good memories. But the problem is, what is there? There's 20 T-shirts on there. I have another one that has another 20 T-shirts on it. And those T-shirts were worthless. They're ragged and all those things. And so we gave them to my grandmother, and it's like, hey, can you make us a quilt so we can remember all these good memories? Maybe that says something about my generation, where I remember things by T-shirts that I get, right? It's but that's kind of what she did. And many of the stuff in my past, even things that are kind of painful or difficult, are represented on this one quilt. And so when we ask the question of who we are, sometimes we can look back at our lives and we kind of see it's like, oh, I'm actually more like this patchwork quilt. So what's your answer to who you are? Maybe your answer is I love A1 steak sauce. I don't know. And that's just who I am. But that's, we could go through, there are big parts of our history that causes us to kind of discover who we are. And we say many things about who we are. And many of you in the room today, you may go, oh, I'm a Christian. That's who I am. I'm a Christian. Well, this will sound crass, I guess. I don't know. But what type of Christian? Like that's, I grew up in Georgia. We're all half Baptist, right? Like that's, I have heavy LCMS leanings with a little bit of the Deep South inside of me, right? Like that's kind of what are you? And you look around, and I have conversations with many of you. Many of you have totally different backgrounds, and you bring up, and you all have different ideas of what it means to be Christian there, and many times I think we end up like these people that Peter's talking about, where we look back in our past and we're like, and we think about, I can use church as an example. We go, oh, the church it's just not the same like it used to be. Sure, that pastor's plucky and funny, but he's young and all that stuff. Like sure, that's over there, but man, they don't play the hymns like they used to, or perhaps this happened. But you can look around your own life and you could say that too. You're like, I used to know everyone on my street, and now I don't know anybody. I used to be able to go down to the store and I would talk to everyone, but now I don't know what I'm doing. And it all comes from this, it feels like your identity is kind of eroding. That is who Peter is talking to. He's talking to those people there. And he's writing to these people who've lost their identity. They've lost their homeland. They've lost everything that has gone before them. They were lost in this dispersion. Now, many of them are slaves, and they're asking the question, who are we? Who are we? And that's when Peter answers with this. He goes, since you've been born again, because Jesus has come into your life, you are not perishable, but you are now imperishable through the living and abiding God. Like he's like, since you've been born again and been recreated and made new, he goes, your identity now is all wrapped up in the God that'll never go away. Because all those things that we've sought our identity in the past are like old t-shirts that'll fray and get holes in them, or you'll get too fat and you can't wear them. Like you literally outgrew your old existence, Like you get all these things, and basically they're saying all things. He says that everything is perishable. Oh man, I hit the wrong button. He goes, everything is perishable, but you have been made imperishable. You've been made imperishable, and that's a beautiful idea. Because sometimes when we look at our past and we look at it and we're like, oh no, nothing is how I thought it was going to be. Even though I've exercised my whole life and did all the things that I should, I haven't. Why am I having to go to the hospital now? And look at Dale over there. Dale hasn't exercised a day in his life, and he's 176 and as strong as an ox, right? Like that. That's like what is wrong here? And we can feel like our identities are eroding around us. And Peter wants to encourage you, and he's like, I see that. I see that it feels that way. And I want you to understand that the good news that was preached to you is one that doesn't pass away. It's one that grabs you and makes you part of it. It makes you part of the good news of the gospel. That it's brought you in to this patchwork quilt. So our gospel lesson today is very interesting when it's talking about all of this. It's Jesus, at the beginning of our gospel lesson here in Luke, Luke chapter 1, verse 33, 21, verse 33. Jesus starts talking right off the top. He says, heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. Which is exactly what Peter's quoting. And if you caught it from Isaiah is saying the same thing. Comfort, comfort my people. Everything's like grass. Grass withers, flower fades, right? But the word of the Lord stands forever. He goes, heaven and earth will pass away, but my words will not pass away. But my word will not pass away. And he says, but take heart, everyone. Take heart. Don't be weighed down. Don't seek your identity in the bottom of a wine glass. That's what he says, dispensation of drunkenness, the cares of this life. But that day come, that if you look for all of your identity in other things, the day when the flower fades, when everything will pass away, it'll catch you like a trap. And so he's saying, don't worry, it's going to happen. But sometimes life's tragedies feel bigger than just us saying, don't worry about it, right? And I think we see that in here. Let me show you something. So Jesus says, heaven and earth will pass away. I'm going to fast forward 4 verses, all right? It's going to go into the next chapter, and it says this. Then Satan entered Judas, called Iscariot, who was of the number of the 12, and he went away and conferred with the chief priests and the officers how he might betray him to them. I think that the gospel writers are exceedingly clever. They write this story about, Luke is writing the story, and Jesus says, listen, it's all going to pass away, but I won't pass away. And then right after that, he begins writing the story about Judas and how Judas is trying to make him pass away. And we all know where that ends up. Judas is successful. He doesn't really want to be successful at the end, but he's successful in his attempt to make what looks like the word of the Lord pass away. And many times when we look at our own identities, we look around, we can even look at the churches and we can say, oh, the church just isn't as powerful as it used to be. The church isn't as good as it used to be. They're all taking our rights away, and we look at that and we start getting angry, and because we begin to feel like we're losing our identity. Or we look around at our own selves and we see how our own selves are becoming tattered and haggard, and we don't know which way to go. But then we're reminded again of what is said in 1 Peter, that all flesh is like grass, and its glory like the flower grass, and the grass withers, and the flowers fall. But the word of the Lord lasts forever. And we see that Jesus goes to the cross and rises for each one of us. And what I think he does then is he takes all these Christians in 1 Peter. He takes all these Christians who feel neglected and feel afraid and feel abused, and he takes all of us. I mean, many times, there have been 2 times when I was this close to quitting this whole thing. I was like, I did better when I was selling used cars. It's like, break out the plaid pants and the polos. Let's make that happen again, right? Like, there's been many times when I've feel frayed and pulled apart, and we don't have to turn on the TV for very long. And and what I think is funny is you turn on the TV, watch like 24-hour news, and you have people that are making multiple millions of dollars telling us how we're losing everything. They might be lying to us. They may be telling us stuff so that we'll vote in their accord, right? Like and many times we can look around and we're like, man, I feel like I'm just tattered and abused. And when the beautiful part of Jesus is that when he raises again, And he goes to the disciples and he breathes on them forgiveness of their sins. He encourages them to be together. And the way that I see it really now is that it was never really about us being individuals out in the world, but it's about us living a life together, where the Lord takes our lives, which may be various shapes of holes and tatters, and quilts them together, makes them into a nice patchwork quilt. And when he binds us together, which what he does in baptism and he does through communion, he binds us all together so that we can be with him. He binds us all together into this one patchwork quilt so that when someone is lonely, when someone has been beat up, when someone has lost their identity, Jesus is able to take his beautiful quilt of all those old memories and shared and put it around them so they can feel warmth and loved. And I think that's hope in the gospel for all of us. That we together as the people of God here can be a warm embrace to those who feel like they've lost everything. Because we feel like that too at times. And we can share the love of Christ who did lose everything and came back again. That we can say, we together as the people resurrected. And that's good news. And we'll end right there.